All right, everyone. It is 12 o'clock Central Time. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar on funding your adoption in 2025. One last call here. When you logged in, you should have seen a poll question or two poll questions. If you want to go ahead and answer those, and then we're going to be reviewing the results here shortly. So I'll give a few more seconds for you to answer those, and then we'll get going. All righty. Well, we're going to kick it off. Well, thank you all again for spending your lunchtime hour with us here. Here are those poll results if you want to take a quick look. So as we're talking about funding your adoption in 2025, it's great for us to first kind of know who's our audience. So what stage in the adoption journey are you, or are you just in the adoption space in terms of maybe working at an agency or something of that nature? So as we can see, good amount, 24% here, just starting the process or considering. And then we've got almost 40% are home study approved. Congratulations to you all. That's a big step. Excited for you. And then we matched or finalized. All right, got 10% there. And then some agency workers. Shout out to the agency workers. Love it. All right, and if we look at the results here for that other question, we'll take a look at those real quick. So how confident are you in fully funding your adoption? So 14% very confident. Way to go. Good for you guys. You've done your homework. I'm glad you're set up for success. Somewhat confident, 65%. Sounds good. And then not very confident overall, 20%. Not confident at all. So that's really helpful for us to see as we kind of frame up the discussion for today. So just a little bit of housekeeping here. We are going to record today's webinar. We'll be sending that out in email after today is done. We are also going to have Q&A kind of sprinkled throughout the webinar today. If we don't get to your question, we are getting all those questions saved in our system. So we'll reach out to you individually to answer any additional questions you have. And if you have any questions throughout, you can also post those into the chat or the question section. And then our team is going to see those. And then some we may be able to respond to and type as we're going throughout. Some we may be able to address at the end. So I think I've covered everything here. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panel. So I'm Jared DeLong. I work for an organization called Both Hands. We help families fundraise for their adoptions. And then we've got JT here as well. And JT, I'll let you all pass it off and work your way down. And panel, I'd love for you all to each just share what's your name, what your organization, and what's your role at your organization, and then where are you in the country?
Yeah, my name is JT Olson. I am the founder and president of Both Hands Foundation. We basically, like Jared said, help families raise money, and we do it by serving a widow. So it's a blast.
My name is Kate Johnson. I am Senior Manager of Programs with Show Hope, and we provide grants. We'll talk about that today for families in the adoption process. And our office is located in Franklin, Tennessee, which is near Nashville.
Hi, everyone. I am Tammy Burkett, and I am the Managing Director at ABBA Fund, and I am in Plano, Texas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madison Ziegenbein. I'm with Pathways for Little Feet, and we support adoption foster families all along their journey, and our office is located in Houston, Texas.
And my name is Rich Metcalf. I'm the Program Director at Lifesong for Orphans, and we are located in the cornfields of Central Illinois.
Hi, I am Becky Wilmoth. I am an adoption tax credit specialist and also an enrolled agent at Bill's Tax Service. We help families with the adoption tax credit, train caseworkers and agencies. and we are in Southern Illinois.
All right. Thank you, Becky. And thank you, panel. So for today, we're all friends here on this panel. We've done this together multiple times at different conferences over the years. And as we kind of got talking together, we just kind of had the idea, well, if someone isn't able to make one of those conferences in person, why not do something like a webinar today where we can just share about our organizations with you all? So panel, thanks again for being here and making it happen. So collectively, I think we would all agree that we never want to see any families go into debt in order to adopt. And so I believe, and our hope is that after today, you can leave with at least one new resource you didn't know about beforehand. But ultimately, that you would feel that confidence that you can fully fund your adoption if you just know what all resources are available out there. So we're going to be covering grants and loans. And then, as Becky mentioned, we're going to have her cover the adoption tax credit. And then we're going to cover fundraisers as well, and also some post-adoption support, because we know for some of you, this may not be your first adoption. And once that child comes home, that's just the start of the journey. So we want to be able to cover that a little bit too. And so at the very end, we're also going to share a little special gift. So you'll be taking in a lot of information today from everyone. So the team put together with Tammy's leadership a cheat sheet, essentially a one-pager that kind of breaks down all of our organizations and helps you just think through how we all can assist in terms of funding, when to apply, and how funds are dispersed and things like that. So it's a free little gift we're going to give you at the end. There'll be a QR code for you to be able to download. So stick around. So we went over those poll results already. Very interesting stuff. So thank you all again for taking the time to fill that out. So why is private adoption so expensive? We all work in this space, and if you're just starting your adoption, or maybe you've adopted before, I'm sure you've gotten this question. This is the big one that we get all the time. And so I think it really is important that we first just understand, is cost really a barrier to adoption? And so our friends over at NCFA, the National Council for Adoption, they actually did a study back in 2022, and they found that over 4,000 adoptive parents who responded, over 50% of them did indicate that cost was a major barrier for them. It really was a big hurdle for them in their adoption journey. And then our friends over at CAFO, Christian Alliance for Orphans, they did a study a little while back, further back than 2022. And so they asked families and Christians, what keeps people from adopting? And outside of those that never even thought about it before, you can see the next one here is it's just too expensive. So we know that the cost of adoption is a huge barrier. And so when we're working with families here at Both Hands, or if I'm just talking with families in general, I always encourage them that you need to do your research. You need to ask the tough questions when you're considering adoption agencies to work with. I know some of you all already are, but if you're very early on in the process, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Take that time to be well educated, to understand what all goes into those costs. And I think it's so important to not just assume that it's expensive, but have no explanation why. And the main reason behind that is because as you get into your funding journey and you start asking people to be a part of fundraisers with you, right? Or it could be at your church, your small group, it could be friends, family. This is the big question that you're probably going to get asked if you haven't already. And so if you don't have a great answer to this question, it's not going to instill confidence in those folks that you're talking to, right? So on the flip side, our friends over at Lifeline Children's Services, they were kind enough to kind of share, this is just a breakdown of overall adoption costs. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these here today for sake of time, but this is generally what kind of makes up those different costs. Now, what you don't want to do is over inundate someone and look like this person with going through every single detail about all the costs, right? But if you can give them a well-educated response that instills confidence in that person, where they understand, okay, because unfortunately, adoption and the world that we're in, there have been situations over the years of fraud and abuse and families that have been taken advantage of, or not licensed agencies that aren't going about things properly. And that's as much as we're fighting and hoping that that will change and the costs will come down, that's the reality of the broken world that we live in. But if you can take the time to educate someone and have a good understanding of what goes into those costs, because you've had those tough conversations with your agency, then that's going to instill confidence in that person, right? So now you've turned someone through your education, through being and transparency, you've turned someone from a skeptic into an advocate. So now they're fighting for your adoption. They're in the trenches with you, right? You're building that community of people around you that when they hear about maybe it's a grant, out there, they can let you know about it so you can apply for it. When it comes time to doing a fundraiser and getting people on board, they are invested in you and in your family because you took that time just to educate them in what could really be a brief moment. So I just think that's really important to keep in mind here as we're talking about how to answer that question. So, whoops, slides got off here. Let me present one more time. All right, so now we're going to go into adoption grants and loans. Can everyone still see my screen okay? All right, great. So I'm going to pass it off to Tammy with ABBA Fund. So Tammy, take it away. Can you fill us in on ABBA Fund?
Sure. So ABBA Fund would be a resource for you guys in several different areas. One, you can fundraise through us. We can set up an online fundraising page, and you can fundraise all the way from the beginning of your adoption in order to help pay for your home study, all the way until the end, even a little bit afterwards if you have a major medical needs your child does that your insurance doesn't cover. We also have interest-free loans. That's kind of how we were founded. Our average loan typically ranges between $10,000 and $20,000, and for a domestic adoption, those come in at the end. For a international adoption, typically we can pay your last payments to your agency or even some of your travel needs. Yeah, you do have to be home study approved in order to apply for the interest-free loan. You can begin applying for it, but we can't give you an answer until after we have that home study as part of your paperwork and along with the other required documents. Our loan applications can be reviewed. Typically, we say an average of 4 to 6 weeks. We do and can expedite reviews if we need to with no problem whatsoever. On the fundraising applications, we can get those reviewed and you set up within a few days, possibly within longest maybe a week, just depending on what day we get your application and the required document that comes along with that, which is a pastor's reference. I think I covered everything on my slide.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tammy.
Sure.
All right, pass it off to Rich.
Thanks, Jared. Lifesong, very similar to other partners and people you'll hear from today. Our hope and our heart is to come alongside and help the best way we can. Direct grants and matching grants, particularly matching grants, are the primary funding source for Lifesong, with an intent that a matching grant is a catalyst that helps raise significantly more than the amount that you're given. Typically, families will receive a matching grant in the $6,000 to $10,000 range, and depending on how they share and the tools they use, we regularly see families then take that matching grant to raise $20,000 to $30,000 and more. There's interest-free loans available also, a free online crowdfunding site called My Story. The application process is very similar to as Tammy shared from ABBA. You need to have your home study completed, but you can send your application in ahead of that, You need to wait for the home study before any grants are given. The application process to get reviewed and a response is typically 2 to 4 weeks. And throughout your process, then we'll serve you and help you as you raise funds until your adoption is complete, and all possible adoption expenses have been reimbursed for you, either reimbursing families for receipts or paying invoices for you. 100% of every donation that comes in goes for your adoption, doesn't count as income for you. And if your church is interested, we serve a lot of churches to help the churches support their communities and their families as well. As you can see, post-adoption support is available later on for you, and I think we'll talk about that in a while too. Thanks, Jared.
All right. Thank you, Rich. And if you all have questions for everyone attending here, feel free to add those, post those in the questions in the chat, and we will pause to take those throughout. All right, Madison.
Hi, my name's Madison with Pathways, and think you're going to hear a lot of echoes throughout our different presentations. And my hope is that that's an encouragement of, like Jared mentioned, we're all friends and we're all very much in alignment and want you to receive as much funding as possible through working with all of us. And so Pathways, we offer interest-free loans for families who are adopting, international, domestic, and foster to adopt. We provide those funds to the families directly. Like our colleagues, you must be home study approved to apply, and you should hear back from us within 1 to 2 weeks. We can do expedited applications if needed. We know there's situations that arise where more immediate funding is needed. And so if awarded, there's some paperwork that goes with that, but the funds are given directly to the family within 30 days, 1 month prior to expected mother due date, international final travel, or placement finalization. And then the repayments on that loan are customized to each family's unique financial situation, and those begin 2 months after the loan is funded.
All right, thanks, Madison. And lastly, Kate.
Awesome. Well, Show Hope, our mission is to care for orphans by engaging the church and reducing barriers to adoption. So one of the main ways we do that is through our Adoption Aid grant program. So this program provides direct grants. Those typically range between $8,000 to $12,000. And those grant funds are dispersed directly to agencies. We do require that you are home study approved in order to submit your application. And one of our qualifications is also that you're working with a licensed placement agency that's also a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So you can check with your placement agency to double check that and make sure. We do have quarterly application periods. So we have 4 periods throughout the year. That's March, June, September, and December. So we also have application deadlines that correspond with each of those periods. So it might take a little bit for you to get a response. So pay attention to those deadlines if you have specific timing for when you're going to receive placement or travel for placement. So in terms of disbursements, we do pay the providers directly. For domestic, that's at placement, and for intercountry, that's once your travel is booked for your placement trip. Trying to think if I've missed anything. In terms of intercountry adoptions, we do require that it be through a country program that is party to the Hague Convention. So you can look that up online as well. And then we've also created a website called howtoadopt.org. That's a really great resource for those of you that responded that you're early on in the process or still in the consideration phase. It has a lot of great information just to learn more about what all is involved in adoption, and also provides a lot of funding resources, including all of our friends here today, but a couple other options to consider. And then in terms of post-adoption support, we provide medical care grants that's after finalization of your adoption has occurred up through age 18 of the child. And that's to help meet any physical medical needs that may not be covered by your insurance. And then we also have a mental health grant that is only through select providers right now. So I think that's everything for me.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. Well, so for the four of you that just shared, we have a few different questions that have come in that I wanted to just take a little brief Q&A and give you all a chance to answer. So a common one, Angelina, she was asking, so kind of just what general criteria for being approved for a grant or loan. So I'm thinking in terms of if you all want to share about statement of faith, in any income requirements, if someone has received a grant or loan from another organization, does that impact your organization's decision at all? So would any Tammy maybe want to kick it off there?
Sure, I'll be happy to. As far as requirements, I always like to tell people that every adoption is different. So don't stop because of something that I might say right now. Please call me and ask me any questions. I'm sure everybody would like to talk to you as well. But first, we have to have that completed application. And with each, whether or not you're fundraising and or getting an interest-free loan, there are some things that we look at. Some of those would be that you do need to be a believer, where you're going to have some spiritual questions that you're going to need to ask, because ultimately at the end of the day, we want your child to be raised in a loving, nurturing Christian environment with support around you and around that child. There will also be some things from a financial perspective that we would need, like your your latest credit report, maybe your paychecks. We ask for some references and some things like that. To fundraise through us, it's a lot simpler. We have a part 1 and a part 2 of our application for fundraising, or if you're applying for funds from one of our church partners for a grant or matching grant, then you only fill out part 1 and we just need your pastor reference. But there are some essay type questions that you'll need to answer in that.
Thank you, Tammy. Anyone want to go next? Rich, Madison?
Sure. The application needs to be complete. That'll be true for all of us. We want to see Christian families completing the application who have their church aware of their adoption and supportive of their adoption. It can be any kind of adoption. It has to be legitimate, and there has to be a financial need. So I saw a couple of questions going through about how much do you share your financial side of things. I think all of us would say, be honest, be open, share everything. And we would say, trust God to provide. He's the one who is leading you to adopt and will provide for your adoption. So complete everything in the application and trust him to work through all the different options and opportunities that you have to receive grants, loans, and support, and to fundraise.
Thanks, Rich. Madison?
I don't know that we have too many different ones than Lifesong and ABBA Fund mentioned, but I've seen a couple of questions about income requirements coming through. So for Pathways specifically, we don't have an income requirement. We look at the, finance. I kind of mentioned that we look at the finances individually for each family and are looking at everything, like not just your income. We're looking at the anticipated expenses after adoption as well. And so that cheat sheet that Jared mentioned that Tammy's created has some of those details on there too for each organization that could be helpful to review as well for the requirements.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I will say in general, just that all of us are on the panel here. We're constantly checking in with each other and kind of referring families to each other. Rarely are we really, looking with the impact of receiving a grant or loan from another organization, impact our decision. We together want to help families, help you all to be fully funded or close to it. Hey, Kate, is there anything else you wanted to add or?
I don't think so. I feel like y'all covered it.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we're going to keep it moving here on to the adoption tax credit. It sounds scary, maybe a little intimidating, but y'all, we have Becky here. She is a trained ninja on the tax credit. And I've given her the very difficult job of trying to boil all this down to 10 minutes a week. I'm sure Becky, you could probably spend hours, walking through this, and I'm sure you do with the families you work with. But could you just, for today, give us an overview? What is the tax credit? And just the basics that families need to know to get started.
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Becky, and I am an enrolled agent, which is the highest license you can obtain with the IRS. And I am an adoption tax credit specialist, and we help families, from all over the United States. The adoption tax credit was instituted to help make adoption more affordable. And as we all know on this panel, it can be very expensive, but there are so many ways that it can help. And one of those ways is with the adoption tax credit. Now, depending on what type of adoption that you're going to have, international adoption and foster care, they have to be final before you can claim the adoption tax credit. But a private domestic adoption, whenever you start paying those expenses, you can start claiming the credit the next following tax year. So that kind of helps you as you go along. Up until this month, it was a non-refundable tax credit, which means it covers your federal tax liability. And then what you didn't use, you carried it forward to the next year, and you could carry it forward for up to 5 years. Now, with the HR 1 that has been passed, 5,000 of that, is refundable now. So, which that is going to help so many more families. It does apply to the IRS code says one successful adoption. So the great thing about the adoption tax credit is, as I said, if you don't use it the first year, you can carry it forward for up to 5 years. And I've been doing this for a very long time, and I have seen families that it has helped them so much because it does cover their federal tax liability over several years. And so many times they're able to go in and adjust their W-4 at their employer. And so that means they have more of their paycheck coming back to them throughout the year. And, of course, that helps, with their daily expenses. And so we are very thankful. We have been advocating for many years for it to become refundable again. And what the refundability part means is that once your federal tax liability is met, if it's fully refundable, you would get the remaining amount of the adoption tax credit that year in your refund. At this point, 5,000 of the $17,280 is the maximum amount of the credit that you can claim for 2025. Well, now 5,000 of that is now refundable. So it's going to help more families, especially those that are self-employed, because when the entire amount was not refundable, it did not cover self-employment tax. So that is, one of the great benefits now of 5,000 of it being refundable. One of the biggest issues with the adoption tax credit in the past has been what qualifies as adoption expenses. What are qualified expenses? And so the IRS code shows any reasonable and necessary expense as long as it does not violate the federal or state law. So attorney's fees, agency fees, court fees, travel expenses, that includes hotels, meals, gas, all of those dossiers, home study, all of those expenses are qualified expenses. The only expenses that are not qualified are birth mother expenses. And the reason is because that violates federal and state law. And so it's very important I always advise people whenever I'm doing a webinar or a seminar or a podcast or whatever, that it is very important that you get a big manila envelope, keep all of your receipts in there, keep your home study, keep your final judgment of adoption, and if you by chance are in a foster adoption and your child is declared special needs according to the state's criteria and you qualify for a subsidy agreement, you qualify for the full amount of the credit with no expenses. But keep all of those in that envelope. At this point, thankfully, you do not have to send the required documentation into the IRS with your tax return. Everything, the Form 8839, where you would claim the adoption tax credit or the income exclusion, that is the form that you are going to use. You do not have to send that documentation in, but if the IRS requests it, first of all, if you get a letter, don't panic. There are certain documentation that is required if they request it. You're going to need the final judgment of adoption. You are going to need a copy of your expenses and a copy of your home study. And like I said, if it's a foster care adoption, you're going to need the copy of that subsidy agreement. So if you do receive a letter, don't panic. You just send a good copy of that. And then the other thing that I highly recommend is when you send in that documentation, that whoever is first on the tax return, that you put their social security number at the top of every single page. Because a lot of times what happens when your documentation gets to the IRS, your tax return goes one direction and your documentation goes another direction. And so sometimes it does not wind up back to your account. So it's very important to understand that documentation, anytime that there were a large percentage of adoption tax credit returns that went under review, it went under review because of documentation. So that is one of the most important items that you need to remember, especially when you get home and the dust is kind of settling and everything's final, that you just need to put everything in that envelope and put it away. And that way you know where it's at. And here's where the magic happens. Because of the HR1, everybody's calling it the one big beautiful bill. As I stated, 5,000 of that 17,200 is refundable. That means once your federal tax liability is, that 5,000 will be refunded in addition to the remaining portion of your refund. What the non-refundable portion does, I've been old enough and been doing this long enough now that I remember the days where you would go, figure up your taxable income, and then you would get out the tax book and you would follow across the line to see how much tax that, the IRS says that you owe. And so what happens is the adoption tax credit covers that federal tax liability before it ever gets to your withholding, before it ever gets to any of the refundable credits, before it ever gets to the refundable portion of the regular child tax credit, and before it gets to the refundable portion of the adoption tax credit. And so that is for all adoptions after December 31st of 2024, the refundable portion. Now, let's say you qualified for the adoption tax credit and you did not know it. You can amend your return. You can amend your return and go back 3 years to claim any of that adoption tax credit that you should have claimed on your original return. since the adoption tax credit has a 5-year carry forward, you can actually go back and amend 5 years, but you will not get a refund except for the last 3 years. And so there is an income phase out range, and that is for modified adjusted gross income. It is not adjusted gross income, it is modified adjusted gross income. And what that means is anything that we call a front page deduction is added back into your adjusted gross income. And those are things like student loan interest deduction, traditional IRA deductions. Those things are added back in, and that determines your modified adjusted gross income. So for 2025, if your modified adjusted gross income is under the 259,190 and you qualify for the adoption tax credit, if you get over that 259,190, it starts to phase out in increments. And as you can see, there's a $40,000 range. So it's basically at 10,000 mark, you start losing some of the adoption tax credit that you can claim. And this is where tax planning is very, very important, because a lot of times you can defer comp, or, maybe you can, delay income, or maybe you can take time off so that you can, make sure that you are underneath that modified adjusted gross income range. And one of the other things that I want to mention also, a lot of times families, when they are, in the end process and they need that final push for funds, you can now, because of QBOD, that it was part of the Tax Cut and Job Act, it's qualified birth or adoption distribution from your retirement. Each spouse can now take up to $5,000 out of their qualified retirement without that 10% penalty if you're under 59 and a half. Now, you're still going to have the tax, but again, the adoption tax credit is going to help because it has to be in the year that the adoption is finalized that you can take that $5,000 QBOD distribution. And as I said, each spouse can take $5,000 out of their qualified retirement. And here are some things that, we have learned over the last 15 years that we have been doing this and advocating for adoptive families and advocating for it to be refundable again. As I said, just mark IRS documentation on a big manila envelope. Put your home study, put all of your receipts in there. And now if it's an international adoption, I highly recommend you make good copies when you get home and put those in that envelope, because a lot of times in international adoption, those receipts will fade very quickly, the thermal receipts. And so make good copies of those, throw them in the envelope, throw the final judgment of adoption in there. And then if it is, like I said, a foster care adoption, throw the copy of the subsidy agreement. Now, these have to be signed and dated by the authorities. The IRS will not accept a preliminary copy of these. They have to be the signed and dated copies by the authorities, such as the judge, the country of adoption, whoever does your home study agreement. All of those things have to be the final signed and dated copies. And I highly, highly recommend that you use someone that knows about the adoption tax credit, because there are many that do not. There are many CPAs and enrolled agents that just don't understand how it works, when to claim it, how to claim it, what are the qualified expenses. So you can actually go on the irs.gov website and look and see if that preparer is on the preparer directory list. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask them, how many adoption tax credits have you done? How many do you do a year? How many cases have you won against the IRS when it has went under review or under audit? Don't ever be afraid to ask questions, because you're talking about $17,280 tax credit and a $17,280 income exclusion that you may qualify for. The income exclusion, if you have a qualified adoption benefit program with your employer, you can exclude that $17,280. It just cannot be for the same expenses as you used for the adoption tax credit. And as I stated many times, someone, once they realize their adoption is final and they're going to be able to use the adoption tax credit, they can go in and they can adjust their W-4 and, have less withholding and get more back on their paycheck. And then you just make sure you remember to change it back once your adoption tax credit is used up. And I highly recommend keep contacting your congressman, your congresswoman. And, we are part of the adoption tax credit work, and many of the organizations on here have also been advocating very strongly to get it refundable, because it helps more people that have, maybe a lower income and they don't have federal tax liability. Maybe they're self-employed, and when it's non-refundable, it does not cover self-employment tax. So keep advocating, keep advocating, keep advocating. And if you don't know who your senator or representatives are, you can go to adoptiontaxcredit.org, and you can find out who they are and how to contact them. And if you ever have any questions, you can always call us, you can email us, and we are more than happy. We have been blessed by adoption. And so our burden and our desire is to help as many adoptive families as possible. And we get it. We absolutely get it. Many in our office have adopted. My boss and his wife are foster and adoptive parents, and their third adoption was a daughter originally from Guatemala. I've been blessed by adoption twice, domestic. And so it's very important that if someone tells you you don't qualify for the adoption tax credit, find someone else, because all adoptions qualify except for the adoption of your spouse's child. When and how much is determined by everybody's situation is different. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Thanks so much, Becky. And I know we've probably had 60 total questions come in. We probably had 10 come in for Becky here. So just a reminder to y'all, we won't have time to get through all the questions, but we're going to reach out to you afterwards and be sure that we get you the answers that you need. So these questions y'all have sent in, we'll be sure to get these to Becky, so she can reach out if we're not able to answer them ourselves. All right, and she touched on employers a little bit. Just wanted to also mention in there employer benefits. So it's always wise to just see, does your employer offer any type of benefit when it comes to adoption? And if they don't, it never hurts to ask, because you could be the first employee at your company that helps to put some type of benefit in place for future adoptive families at your company. It's never, there's nothing wrong with asking and throwing the idea out there. So, all right, adoption fundraising. I'm going to cover this as quickly as I can. Pretty passionate about it, and there's plenty to cover, but I want to leave some time here at the end for questions. So when we talk about fundraising, we think it's always helpful for families to figure out, and it seems obvious, just what do you want your goal to be? How much do you need to fundraise? And then after you've done that, really prioritizing, okay, based on how much we need to raise, let's look at different fundraisers. And when it comes to that, there's two things to factor in: is how much time and effort is going to need to go into this? Are there going to be costs involved, expenses to actually, put on this fundraiser? And any idea how much it could potentially raise? which I'm going to go through kind of a few different options to throw out there. But we always suggest, it's been better in general. Work smarter, not harder. So start with those more higher yielding options out there, and then kind of work your way down from there. Because if you really want to leverage and get your community involved in whatever this fundraiser is, if you go back to the well time after time, doing all these different fundraisers, eventually that community is going to start to kind of tap out, could get burnt out with trying to go back to the well. So in terms of just highest yielding, I'm sure y'all have seen this for if you know other families adopting, but crowdfunding and peer-to-peer is typically a great way to fundraise online and to get your community involved. And so we've just listed, I know there's a lot of other platforms out there in terms of fundraising. Just wanted to highlight a few for you. So ABBA Fund and Adopt Together, these are two ones that you're welcome to check out. And there's no home study required for these fundraisers. So if we'll have families that may ask, hey, how can I fundraise for just these initial fees to get started? These could be two great resources for you. And then Both Hands, I'm going to talk more about Both Hands here in the next little bit, but we help families fundraise by setting up on an online donation page, as well as encouraging them to send physical letters. So we'll talk about that here shortly. I'm sure y'all have seen GoFundMe. Lots of families will use GoFundMe. And then Lifesong as well. Lifesong has their My Story pages. And so with Both Hands, ABBA Fund, and Lifesong, there are no fees for fundraising through their platform. So that's just something for the things to consider here. Something to keep in mind is, what do those fees look like? And then also just in general, if you're not crowdfunding, I'd encourage you to look into it, because it's a great way to expand your network, right? How many times will you hear about somebody that donates to someone's fundraiser or adoption because they saw it get shared on social media or somewhere else? And then I would also consider with those people out there that have a heart behind giving and typically give larger amounts, they usually have a donor advised fund established with somewhere like a Fidelity or a Schwab, Renaissance Charitable, National Christian Foundation. And so our gift's going to be tax deductible, right? If the organization is a nonprofit and can receive those gifts, that's a greater opportunity for funds to be given towards your adoption, and more incentive for the donor to do so for the tax benefit as well. So there's fundraising events too. I'm sure you all have seen these out there, right? Nothing crazy, unusual. These are very popular fundraisers. The puzzle game, that is one that's pretty unique. You could look into. It's essentially taking a photo of the child you're going to adopt and breaking it up into different puzzle pieces, and then asking your community to each donate a portion. Each piece of the puzzle could cost so much or be a certain donation amount, and you're trying to complete the puzzle by having people donate. So that's one that I saw. I think a couple people shared here in the chat. Merchandise sales, that's another great way as well. And these and more are found in Julie Gumb's book she has here. It's called You Can Adopt Without Debt. It's available on Amazon, so you're welcome to go check that out. So, with all these fundraisers, it really is, are you passionate about it, right? So if you love pickleball, do a pickleball tournament, right? It's taking the nation by storm. But if you hate pickleball, or if that's just not something that your community is really involved in, you might want to pick something else that you're passionate about. Because if you can't be passionate about whatever that fundraiser is that you want to put on, then how do you expect to encourage others to be a part of it if you're not even excited about it? So just pick something that's excited for you. Thomas Wells just said, yeah, so they did a yard sale and they raised $15,000 through that. So it's amazing, if you can really get passionate about whatever that fundraiser is, how much you can raise. And then there's other families too that sometimes may have a harder time when it comes to these types of fundraisers. So I always encourage looking at crowdfunding as a great option. And so next, and our final kind of section here before our Q&A time is we're going to talk about both hands. So as I mentioned, I'm our executive director here at Both Hands. JT Olson on the call, he is our founder. And so we help families to fundraise for their adoptions by organizing a service project where they work on a widow's home. And so I think a great way to kind of explain just how the model works is for JT, could you just share with us really quickly, just in a few minutes, how did this all happen?
Yeah.
How'd you get the idea and where we are today?
Yeah, but first I want to say it's always good to get the band back together. I love this panel and everything we do. It's great to be with you. Yeah, both hands started as a result. I was in the board of a local nonprofit here in Nashville. It's about the turn of the century. And I was doing a golf fundraiser where you send letters out to people and say, would you sponsor me while I golf? And I sent my letters out. I had a buddy who I was in a Bible study with. He sends my letter back to me, does not include a check. He just took a magic marker and he scribbled on my letter. He said, JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you. But you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money. And it hurt my feelings a little bit, honestly, but the main thing was I thought, wow, what a great idea. And every time after that, whenever I saw a 5K or a golf tournament, I kept thinking, man, if all those people were working on a widow's house instead of that, would it be better? Honestly, I did not have the orphan part figured out. And it's a couple years later, I'm in church running a good friend of mine. Hadn't seen him in a couple months. I said, hey, what's up, Don? And he just looked at me and said, we're adopting 4 kids from Moldova. And I was taken aback a bit. Don already has 3 kids at home. And I asked the obvious question, what happened? And he said, well, I went on a mission with Sweet Sleep, delivering beds to orphanages, fell in love with this little boy, George. And in the process of adopting, we found out George has 3 siblings. And Don looked at me and said, we're not going to break up the siblings. And for me at that moment, it took me back to when I was 12 years old, living on a farm in northeastern Iowa. There was 5 of us kids. And one weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary, and us 5 kids were farmed out to different places. And I remember Saturday night being brought home because mom and dad were coming home, and the neighbor dropped me and one of my brothers off, and I was dirty. I'd played in the barn all day, so I had to go in the basement to change. He went in the front door. But I remember sitting in our basement, sitting on this chair, bent over, unlacing my boots, and my brother came walking down the stairs. I just looked up at him and I said, are mom and dad home? And he looked at me and he said, mom and dad are dead. And I said, what? And he said, mom and dad are dead. They were killed in a car accident an hour ago. And he turned around and walked upstairs. And I remember, he was in shock. He had just found out as he went through the house. He was coming down to tell me. But I remember that moment, and I remember hitting that cold cement floor and crying like any 7th grader would. I know what it's like to be an orphan, and I know what it's like to experience that and to wonder what's going to happen to us. Are we going to stay together? Can we stay in the farm? What's all the things that, a 12-year-old shouldn't have to think about. But I also know what it's like to be rescued, because about 3 months before this accident, my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, they changed their wills that if anything would happen to one of them, the other family would take them. And my aunt and uncle lived in a really nice suburb of Milwaukee, very different than a rural farm in Iowa, but they already had 3 kids of their own. They were 33 years old, and they took all 5 of us. I know what it's like to have somebody come in and say, we got you. We got you. So back to the hallway in church, when Don is sitting there saying, we're not going to break up the siblings. Honestly, that hit me hard. I'm the just right guy to say that too, because I'm the recipient of somebody who said yes. Somebody who said, yeah, we'll do this. Even though it wasn't in our plan. It wasn't something we had down the road planned, but we'll do it. And by then we had adopted, our 5th child's adopted, and I knew it was going to be expensive. I said, Don, what you doing to raise the money? He said, I have no idea. And he said, it's going to be about 70 or 80,000. I said, I think I got an idea. And that was the first Both Hands project. Don and I recruited about 14, 15 friends. We all sent letters out to everyone we knew saying, would you sponsor me for the day while I fix up this widow's house? All the money I raise goes towards the cost of this adoption. So the widow gets free labor. She gets loved on for a day. And we got most of the supplies donated by local merchants because everyone really loved the idea. I mean, they would just say, yeah, dude, what do you need? I mean, what a great idea. And we spent the day working on Miss Lucille's house. And when it was all over, it's just amazed me. We had raised a little over 70,000. And I just was not expecting that. I was expecting maybe 10 or 15. But that's what kind of made me think this might have legs. maybe this idea works. And a year later, we did another project in 2018. That's when we did that project, but that's when we officially started Both Hands. And now we've done 1,504 projects, 1,504 projects in 45 states, and 1,735 widows have been served, and 1,963 kids are no longer orphans. And in the process of all this, we've raised $22.4 million for families to use. And just a cool part of that, another great thing is that 100% of that goes to the cause. Both Hands doesn't take anything out for operations. Whatever a family raises or a organization who does a project, they 100% goes to them. So that's the Both Hands story. It's to me, it's a story of how God can take something that's hard and difficult and challenging and turn it into something that's just amazing and blesses so many people.
Love it. Well, thank you, JT, sharing your story. So
Yeah.
just a few more quick details on Both Hands. So just to recap, so we coach a family through the whole process where they recruit a team of their friends and family. They find a widow in their community to serve. It's like usually a Saturday morning service project. And then everyone on that team sends out fundraising letters that say, hey, Uncle Bob, sponsor me while I serve this widow. All the money that's raised is going to go towards my friend's adoption over here. So the widow's receiving free help around her home. And then all the money goes towards the family's adoption. And we're seeing our families are raising an average of about 23,000 per project. No fees are taken out, 100% goes to them. We can disperse funds directly to their provider, to their agency, or we can reimburse families for expenses that they've already paid. So we just need proof of payment and proof of receipt. We're actually offering $3,000 matching grants too for any families who they apply with us and they're approved and then they complete their project in 2025. And so we usually recommend families plan for, give yourself 6 to 8 weeks just to plan well with doing your project. And then JT and our team coaches every family through all the steps. We have a toolkit on our website too. Everyone has access to that has everything ironed out step by step. So, and then for when it comes in terms of letter supplies or projects for the widow's home, we provide $1,000 supply grant per project as well. So that can be used to cover postage, letter printing, mulch, flowers, things for the widow. But usually we encourage families to do more labor intensive tasks like cleaning, landscaping, decluttering, not things that are going to put on a new roof or something that's going to be extremely material intensive. So applications, we review applications every 1 to 2 weeks. Families can apply on our website. Must be home study approved. And we've also started offering post-adoption projects as well. So families can fundraise for medical, mental health, or therapeutic expenses. And then JT mentioned we also can help churches or other ministries raise funds for their operations too in the same model. So, and that's all on Both Hands. So I know we are pretty much right at time. Panel, I thought maybe we might just tackle a few more questions if y'all are okay with sitting tight for a few more minutes. And then, like I mentioned, I know that y'all have sent in several to everyone who's attending. We're getting lots of additional questions coming in. If we don't get to those today, we'll be sure to reach out. We'll also be sending a recording of the webinar today as well, and some additional resources. So I know that one question we're getting in general is just kind of any income caps for us in terms of where a family would be kind of disqualified from funding. And I can start and then I'll kind of pass it off to anyone else here. But both hands, we do not have an income. We do not factor that into a denial or approval of a family, since the majority of the funds they're raising are that they're doing their own fundraising. So income would not be a factor for both hands. And
Same
I'll open
with
it up.
ABBA Fund. Yeah, same with ABBA Fund, no funding cap.
Yep, same with Lifesong. We recognize that every situation is different. We're going to look at the complete application. It's going to include the financials, but we're not going to look if one number's there that we won't consider the application any further.
Same for Show Hope. We don't have an income limit to be eligible to apply.
Same with
Awesome.
Pathways. I think I said that earlier, but we're looking at the whole family.
And to the panel, what would be your number one tip that you'd give families as they're starting the process or in the middle of the funding process? Any challenges or mistakes you've kind of seen families make on the other end that you would, just want to encourage them to avoid?
Only came across it a couple times over the last 15 years. But one thing I do want to caution families is if you have a qualified employer benefit, that's wonderful, but you need to make sure that you would qualify to start claiming the adoption tax credit. Because if your employer gives you that benefit or grant or reimbursement of expenses, and you don't qualify to take the adoption tax credit yet, it becomes taxable income. So just make sure you kind of got your ducks in a row. And it's the same way if you take the QBOD distribution for the adoption must be finalized before you can take that, in order for the 10% penalty not to apply. And just the other thing is don't panic if you do get a letter from the IRS. They are very, very short-handed right now. So, just keep all your paperwork, you keep all of your documentation. And just as soon as, you get your documentation and your paperwork and that new birth certificate, go straight to the Social Security office and get that Social Security number. It will make a huge difference on your tax return versus getting an A-10.
I'm just going to recommend everyone apply for all of us, talk to all of us. We're not in competition with each other. Jared mentioned that in the beginning. We're all friends. We want this to work for you, and we want you to be able to raise all the money that you possibly can, even from an interest-free loan perspective. I know a lot of people don't want to take out a loan, but to have it in your back pocket is always nice in case all of a sudden you get matched, birth mom is about to have that baby, and you need a little bit of funds still to be able to bring your child home. So call us and work with all of us, because we know how each other works and how the puzzle kind of fits together.
All right, thanks everybody. And I'll just add too that when you're applying for different grants, loans, other things out there, I would keep a copy of your application too, because there could sometimes be certain answers that you're providing on one application that maybe just with a little bit of tweaking and additional information, it could be used for another application. Now, I'm not saying just completely blindly copy and paste, but that at least helps you. That's better than starting from square one. And I saw someone mention earlier just the idea of kind of one application and how that could be beneficial. And we completely understand. I think with all of our ministries and kind of the different areas that we work and different ways that we help, that's how we've all just kind of grown and become about and created our own systems and applications. But one thing at both hands that we are doing is any families that are already approved with any of our grant or loan organizations here on the panel, you're automatically approved for a both hands project as well. So if you're a Show Hope family out there or Pathways family, you've already been approved with them, feel free to let us know, and we'd love to help you. And same goes for Lifesong. If you've done your initial fundraising through Lifesong and you're later in your adoption and looking for just another type of fundraiser to do, we're happy to help you with that too. All right. Well, I know we're just a little over time here, so I've put up this last slide. Feel free to take a picture of this if you'd like. This is that link that I promised we'd share to your free cheat sheet that you're welcome to download. We will email out a copy of that as well with the recording and the slides for today. But wanted to be sure that we got that up for you. And again, and if we didn't get to your question today, I'm so sorry. We had, look at that, we had almost 80 questions I think come in. We will try our best to get to it and follow up with you, but please reach out to us. And we hope that this was valuable, that at least we were able to take away kind of one new resource you maybe didn't know about before. And please do not be discouraged on this funding journey. Again, we really do truly believe that God can help you fully fund your adoption, and we'd love to help. So thank you all again for spending your lunchtime with us. And panel, thank you all again for your expertise today. And that concludes today's webinar. Have a great rest of your day.